Hey guys, Dan Brown Loan Market. We're here with the wonderful Lauren Jones from Lauren Jones Buyers Agency. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
To get started, what do you do?
So I'm a buyer's agent here in Brisbane. What we do is we help home buyers and investors get into the property market. We service from about Burpengary up in the north down to about Beenleigh in the south.
That's where I came across you originally, in a property at Shallow Park. That was quite cool to see you actually were helping guide a buyer through that as well. That was quite cool to have that hands-on experience. How often would you do something like that?
We do a lot of inspections every week. Most of our, probably at least half our investors are interstate though, so we've got to do the inspections on their behalf. But if they're owner-occupiers or they're local, we definitely accompany them through the home. There's a lot of things that we can spot at an inspection that first home buyers or anyone really might not be able to spot, just because we've done hundreds of building and test inspections.
So if you have an interstate buyer, for example, you'll just be doing a fly-through by video and that sort of thing, just to give them a heads up as well? Or?
Yeah, so we do a full video walkthrough for them. They're pretty detailed, like we'll open cupboards and everything like that just to check the condition. And we'll also point out any potential maintenance items or things that we think might pop up with building and pest, or even potential like renovations or what we think they might be able to do to the property.
So this is going to be a loaded question because I do have a lot of customers who are buying as first-time buyers or upgraders or investors who have pre-approvals tend to regularly expire, can't find a property in time. How can you help that process?
So the average home buyer takes between 9 months and 2 years to buy a home. Our average turnaround time is about 30 days.
Yeah.
Probably the longest ever has really taken about 6 months. So at least we can help shave down that time significantly, saving people a lot of time. But also, as we've known in the last couple of years, the market has been increasing significantly. So if you've been looking for a property for 9 months, depending on what market, what style, what budget of property you're looking for, you might have missed out on, $100,000. Especially during the boom, people are missing out on $300,000 in,
No, that's right.
Like obviously we are a fee for service, and a lot of people do ask, can we save the fee up front? Look, sometimes we can through negotiation, but if this is a property on market with a lot of competition, we're not going to be able to buy below market value. I don't care what any other buyer's agent says.
Yep.
Really, a lot of the time, it's actually about securing the property. Agents will give us a lot more information than they'll give the everyday buyer, but we also know the right questions to ask. So we also know how to price a property. Like a lot of people don't know how to price a property. They think it's going to be worth 100K less because maybe they're comparing it to a certain property. But in pretty much every suburb, you could pick the exact same house, pick it up and move it, from one pocket to another, and you might pay $200,000 more, depending on the location. So you still want to come into the property knowing what you've got to pay for it, still set a limit on what you're prepared to pay. But also I think people need to understand that sometimes you do have to overpay for property. And that's something that we do. We will let people know where we see value, but for owner occupiers, we say, look, this is what we actually need to pay. It is above what we suggest. If you want this property enough, you've got to make that decision. Investors are a little bit differently. With investors, it's all about the numbers. We're buying pretty much with a calculator. We won't overpay for investment, but owner occupiers, sometimes this property is worth more to people than it is to other people. Yeah,
I understand. I guess I have customers who come to me a couple of years after the fact and we value the property compared to where it is now, and they love the improvements. They'll always say, hey, I overpaid at the time. I'm like, well, yeah, you did because you got the place, because otherwise you wouldn't have the house, right? So I guess it's not so much you're purposely overpaying, but you did pay what you had to get in if you wanted that place.
Well, in a market that's growing as well, sometimes you need to pay tomorrow's price today because otherwise someone else will.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, by the time the property settles, 30, 60 days, whatever, you're actually already ahead of the market already.
Yeah, that's right. And then in saying that too, instead of having to shop for 9, 12 months, 18 months and having that extra price again, you've already got that, you've locked in at that dollar.
Yeah. I find a lot of people as well, and you probably see it all the time, is they'll do the first pre-approval. Sometimes they lose heart then, and they just stop.
Yeah.
And it can take them years to actually come back in. Then they start again, they realise how much the market's grown, they lose heart again, or they think the market's overpriced and it's going to come back. And it just doesn't. Like, it just keeps going up.
Yeah, like I don't think Southeast Queensland is a bit of a insulated market at the moment. I guess, as you know, with interstate international migration, a lot of infrastructure going on. Don't just say Olympics, there's a lot of other things happening as well. So like, I guess on that side of things, we've always just trudged along. I know that other markets in southern states have had those rises and drops sometimes, but we've been pretty true to hold firm in the worst times and go well in the best. So what else do you offer as a part of the service with that?
I think investment, we do a lot of investment. So I've undertaken formal training to be able to give property investment advice. And with us, the reason we're a bit different to most other buyers agencies is we work off a very personalised strategy for people. So a lot of buyers agencies, if they're an investment specific agency, they'll normally have maybe 1 or 2 strategies that they'll push pretty much every client in. If they're, a very big brand, they might be buying 50 properties at one time, and essentially you kind of fall into a line or a queue waiting for that one property that meets this agency's criteria, and then they put you into it. But they're not understanding things that you might need, such as cash flow, what level of maintenance are you prepared to do to the property? Do you want to add value through way of renovations? So we have a conversation with our clients, we understand what exactly is the right strategy for them, and then we go and implement it.
Cool. We've talked Southeast Queensland, why specifically Brisbane as a market?
Look, I do actually think while the Olympics isn't everything, I think it was a little bit of a catalyst. It really put Brisbane on the map. The world's kind of watching Brisbane at the moment. It's led to a lot of infrastructure coming in, which is creating more jobs for people, and those people coming in for jobs need houses. We've also got a few fundamentals at the moment in Brisbane, such as our very low supply. We've got about 30% less supply than the long-term average, and it's kind of this game of chicken and the egg at the moment, where a lot of people who would normally sell and put their property on the market, they're not doing that because there's not much to buy. Also, it's very difficult to get a rental at the moment, so a lot of people are simply just staying put. And then the third option, if you're looking to sell, tends to be building. People are just terrified of building at the moment. Construction prices are crazy, and it just takes a very long time, so people are nervous about that.
Yeah, that's the one thing as well with our side of the market with chicken and the egg situation. Like I have a lot of customers who aren't looking to sell until they find a place to buy, and
So I've got my own opinions on bridging finance.
Yep.
Do you think a lot of people should look into it, or what kinds of people should consider it?
We've had a big spike in pre-approvals for bridging over the last 3 to 6 months. And the reason behind that is just that subject to sale piece, which it kind of puts an extra clause on your contract, which doesn't look appealing when you're looking to make an offer for a property. So essentially when you're looking to buy a place, but still have to get your house ready, you work to basically buy first and sell later. Get an agent ready with that. You might have a 2-week or a 4-week turnaround between you having both properties and then selling your old place. So having the existing place sell in your own time for the right price and not having to rush because you're doing a subject to sale could work out quite considerably well for you in the long run as well.
So if you've already bought and you still haven't yet sold your property and you've got the debt against both properties, are you paying a mortgage on both at the one time?
Yeah, there is that peak debt position where you are paying a mortgage on both. Now, depending on the bank, most banks will have that peak debt as interest only. So you don't pay the full principal and interest repayment on the whole amount. It will just be the bridging portion, which is interest only. And some banks will lend for that as well to allow you to have that cash flow in your pocket to know that you don't have to find that somewhere during that peak period.
And you pay that with the proceeds of the sale.
Correct. So when everything's said and done, that loan will be gone once you've sold as part of the sale proceeds. Yeah.
What about people who are looking to buy their next home? Do you often find they can actually simply keep their current home as an investment?
In some cases, yeah, it all comes down to cash flow and their borrowing power. So like I guess in this market, it does depend on the lender as to how they'll approach your borrowing power with a single applicant, joint applicant, what sort of rental levels they use in your favor or not. So yeah, it all depends on borrowing power, that sort of stuff. So if the borrowing situation is there, they don't necessarily need bridging, that's fantastic. They can hold their place as a rental.
Yeah, see, I see as well, a lot of the time, a lot of people, they simply want to live in a nicer house or a better location, but they can't afford to do so. So I'll often have this conversation where we say, why don't you actually put your current owner-occupier up as an investment property? You can go and rent the property that you want to live in the location that you want. Now, a lot of people don't like the idea of renting because they think, rent money is dead money. But it's not really when someone else is paying your mortgage.
Yeah, correct.
And also, you're then able to pay off your mortgage using pre-tax dollars because it's an investment property. You're able to negatively gear that, as opposed to when it's your owner-occupier property, you're paying that with post-tax dollars. So it's actually a good financial move.
Yeah, so it's not a bad way of thinking. I guess it's something different that's outside the box, so I appreciate that. Typically, that's not something you'd get in a book, right? So that's good to know. So I guess with long story short with that is bridging is a way to be able to assist with getting you into the market with something if you want to off-sell your place, if your house isn't ready, and also the way to be able to get that subject to sale clause off that when you're looking to make an offer in a new place.
Well, that's it. So it might cost you, I know the last time one of my clients looked into bridging, it was about $8,000 per month to use it. Now, we got the loan in place, and what I notice is when you're selling a home, you're actually able to wait until you get the right price. You don't have to take the offer just because they've got the conditions to meet your settlement and you're subject to sale. So you're often able to get a better price there. Also, on the other side, when you're buying a property, you don't have to put that subject to sale clause in. Now, I've seen offers that have been $50,000, sometimes even $100,000 higher, just because they've got the subject to sale clause in.
Yeah.
So $8,000 to be able to save potentially, $100,000 on the purchase, but also maybe another, 20, 30, 40K on the sale side. It just makes sense.
Yes, it's interesting showing an auction success yesterday. We did the numbers because I know a lot of the banks are conservative with how they approach bridging with their calculations and things like that. They might take a 10% shading off the property price just to cover themselves if anything happens. They'll take an extra shade on the sale price for extra costs involved with stamp duties and things like that. So like in the end, we recalculated those numbers after he had the exact price his sale property went for, and he's in a much better spot even again for his end debt position. So there is massive advantages to be able to go through that bridging process and have it within your control and not be that customer that pays the bank a lot of money for waiting 12 months. If you get rid of it within a month and a half, it's perfect.
What about people who are potentially no longer working, so either retirees, are they able to get bridging finance?
Yeah, absolutely. We've dealt with a lot of customers just on age pensions even who are looking to downsize. So in a situation where they're looking to get to something more manageable, we've had circumstances where they've got a massive house, they want to get rid of it, they just don't have the capacity to be able to then shift off simultaneously to somewhere because they've got to move everything. Even if they have a small debt of some description, if they're going to a no end debt position, we can calculate that there's going to be no loan at the end. There are bridging loan options available for that as well. So there's no income assessment relatively needed for that, considering that the end goal is zero.
Mm-hmm.
And we can show that on the paperwork. We go to the appropriate lenders who can do that, and that puts them in a fantastic spot. So there's no real age issue on that.
And simultaneous settlements are hard. Like I've had clients who their settlement date for both the purchase and the sale of their property is the exact same day. And what that really means is that you've got to pack up your house and have the removalist trucks ready for settlement. And then the moment that the property settles, which is usually only, 2 to 4 p.m. in the afternoon, they've then got to move over to the next property.
Yeah.
Now, there's also a risk that some party involved in the chain extends settlement. So under Queensland contracts, you can actually extend for up to 5 business days, pretty much up until the time of settlement, in which case you've got your removalist out the front of your house and you've got nothing to do with it. So having that bridging finance does make things a lot easier in that sense.
It's one less domino to have to rely on to fall. Yeah.
Another good option is a rent back.
Yep.
So that's essentially where the seller sells the home and then they stay in the home after settlement, they get the cash put into their bank account, and then they live there for a certain period of time. Now, for shorter leases, sometimes, perhaps a 2-week rent back, we won't actually put them in a formal tenancy agreement a lot of the time because that means that, you've got to go to the effort to do entry condition reports. There's often a bond clean that needs to be done. You've got to lodge a bond with the RTA. It can just get a little bit messy. So what you can actually do is what we call a license to occupy, where the seller is actually licensed to occupy that home for, that couple of weeks, and they've still got to leave the property in a condition that they would have at settlement. If it does, so we've had people, for instance, a divorce where one party would like to still remain living in that property afterwards, maybe for, 6, 12 months. We can do a formal lease agreement. They then become the tenant for the new buyer. And, once they're done, at the end of it, they can just move on, start the new life.
Yeah, gotcha. So rent back is an option, I guess, depends on the right circumstance. Yeah, okay, gotcha.
So there's a lot of talk about first-time buyers at the moment and how difficult it is to get into the market. What kind of, concessions or benefits have first-time buyers got at the moment?
First-time buyers, there have been a recent raft of improvements with that sort of stuff, actually. The first-time guarantee, it's been around for a few years now where they've had price caps which have been up to now constantly pricing out. So we've found customers have to move further and further away just to be able to get that 700 cap. Now, the first-time guarantee, the last we were noted with the new government coming in, there was an increase to the cap to South East Queensland or Brisbane to be a mil. And so by increasing to that figure there, now we just get into the market with 50 grand as a deposit, which would be interesting because I know that compared to before, getting into that sort of price level, you'd have to have 5%, 50 grand plus mostly likely 35, 40 grand mortgage insurance, and then you'd have additional stamp duty and things like that on top. So it's quite a interesting one to see. It hasn't quite come into place yet. We are keen to see more details on it in the next couple of months, but that will be a massive advantage for us given how everything seems to be moving very swiftly to the 700 range, and then we're kind of like finding what even goes for 7 now anymore. So between that, there is a help to buy scheme which has just come out as well. There's more details to come on that too, where the government technically owns a portion of your property, and you do have a reduced mortgage for a period of time as well, but we are still waiting for more details with that as well.
Can I ask, so with the first home guarantee, the 5% deposit, what kind of eligibility requirements do you have for that?
There had been in the past income limits for that. So I know there was 125 for single applicants, 200 for joint applicants. They were looking to increase the bar for that at the moment, and that hasn't been announced as to what that bar is or whether they're going to remove it. We will stay tuned for that because we're looking forward to seeing what they have to release. Because let's be honest, to get into $1 million property, that cap may not even be enough, to be honest. So
you wouldn't be able to service the loan, would you?
Correct. So we need to just hold tight a little bit more to see what they have to announce and with what time the banks bring that back on as well.
And do you actually have to live in the property, or can you do this as an investment?
Yes, you need to live in the property.
For how long?
It needs to be an owner-occupied property. I think 6 of the first 12 months, basically, essentially need to be in the place to be eligible for that. So like I know if you are looking to make an offer on a property that's a rental, then it needs to be able to be occupied within 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about stamp duty? Is there any concessions or exemptions for first home buyers there?
There is an exemption at the moment up to 700K. It had been recently moved from 5 not so long ago. I don't know if that's going to increase again with this new government because obviously it's a state-by-state situation, not a federal thing. But there is a cap. There is a exemption up to 700 at the moment, complete exemption, and then it does taper up to 8. But even saying that, with this new first home guarantee, because it is federal compared to state, I don't know how they're going to go with that, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you're looking to build an investment property portfolio, should you start off with a big bank or a second-tier lender?
The big four and a couple of other major banks are typically very good with their policies, being able to accept more different types of customers depending on the types of niches that they have. Second tier banks and regional banks can be quite good with some left field policies compared to the big banks, interest rate price point being a little bit better as well. So you find that the smaller lenders, the non-bank lenders, the non-shop front lenders who don't have the branches need to be more competitive and aggressive with their pricing. And so that's where you find the better deals maybe there as well. Now with off the back of that too, all the banks typically have that assessment rate or affordability rate of 3% above the current interest rates, and that's what they assess your deal on. So the cheaper the rate is, the better your affordability is with that particular bank. Now there are some banks as well that only assess you on a 2% buffer as well. And those guys are pretty good with investment sort of deals as well, where they allow for multiple investments because of that 2% buffer instead of 3% buffer, otherwise hindering your borrowing power if it was 3%. So there are there's a lot of options with those sort of specialized lenders for investors.
So I have a lot of people come to me asking whether or not they should buy a property in a trust.
Mm-hmm.
Now, yes, it can be good for asset protection, but I think there's also quite a lot of downsides as well. So I think the first question you need to ask is, what's the chance of you being sued? Because when you're buying a property in a trust, you're going to get most likely a much higher interest rate. But also, if it's an investment property, you can't actually negatively gear that against your personal income. So you might be negatively gearing $30,000, $40,000 per year, but you can't actually take that off your income at tax time. Also, land tax thresholds are very different. So if you've got two individual people purchasing investment property in Queensland, you each get a $600,000 land tax threshold. Things combined, you've got $1.2 million. Now, if you're buying in a trust in Queensland, I believe it's $300,000 as your land tax threshold, which means that you might instantly put yourself into land tax territory as well.
So I guess I do have a lot of customers as first time investors or second time investors saying, hey, should I put my place into a trust? Or hey, someone said put it into a trust. I obviously specialize in all types of lending. I'd strongly recommend you get specific tax advice on that one before you proceed, because sometimes it may not be beneficial depending on your circumstance. Like I guess if it is indeed for asset protection because of the field you're in or something, it might be ideal. But in circumstance where you're just thinking it's a good idea as a tax or income saving tool, it might be worth having that chat to a specialist before proceeding on that, because there are pros and cons with it.
I think there's also a bit of a misconception with investors where if you purchase a property in a trust, other banks, when you go to buy your next property, won't actually consider that property or the loan against it or the debt against it.
They will,
Yeah, they will. And for them to sometimes not consider it, from my understanding, the property itself needs to be paying itself off or positively geared, which if you're buying something pretty much in any state at the moment, it's going to be negatively geared for probably a decade with interest rates the way that they are at the moment.
We do have points of contact that we can help with that to give you some genuine advice, just to know for sure whether it's suited for you. Yeah. All right. That's a wrap. Thanks for listening, everybody. Lauren, thanks for coming on board. And any questions, guys, reach out.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. Thank you. All right. We're done. That's a wrap. Over.